Hello, this is Jeff Beaudry, and I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about the types of research. And I've started by having the entire field in front of you, and what I want to do is to take you through what is a very important differentiation or separation of the two major types of research, and then go into some of the details and some of the specific characteristics of each one of those. And while we do this, I want you to look back on your experiences with research, but I also want you to have the open mind to look at these types of research with new information, with a new perspective as we talk about this really evolving idea of the types of research. One of the simplest ways to approach the types of research is to create these two major branches. One of them qualitative, that you see on the left, and the other one's quantitative that you see on the right. Now, in the next few minutes, I'm going to have you take a look not only at each side, but to think about the images that you see and what those images evoke in your thinking. So, as you take a look at this image, what kinds of thoughts do you have about qualitative research? And I want you to stop the videotape, think about some of the images and words and thoughts that come to mind as you look at this image. Jot them down, and I'll come back and talk about them. So what I've done here with this tool is to jot down some of the ideas that have come in brainstorms that I've done with this kind of activity with other groups, and hopefully these will overlap with some of your ideas. So the list you see on the right are some of the thoughts that people have had, and the first one is that it's suspect. That qualitative research is not a clean, objective way of thinking, so therefore there's some suspicions around it. It's rarely a straight path. As you can see, that long and winding road is the image that's often evoked. You have to travel a distance. It is about traveling. There are some interesting jokes and comments. It's slippery when wet, so I think that is a reference to the fact that qualitative research seems to be a risk-taking activity or a research method. The next one, not as much the destination as the journey. Of course, the journey is always a powerful metaphor for the kinds of things that are associated with qualitative research because it is such an involved process and it's so personal. It's endless. It's hard to put a beginning and end on a qualitative study, although we have ways of doing that. Many people have a difficulty finding the boundaries. Provides a true picture. I don't not exactly know what was meant by the true picture, but it certainly provides a human picture. It's leading somewhere, yes, and so that kind of I think addresses the suspicions that it is pointless or that it is less than quantitative research. And this last comment is about the idea of perspectives. That is, there are two sides to the road, and in fact, there's even the perspective that the qualitative study may not be about the road or the journey at all, but maybe about what is on the sides of the road, that is the green space, the hills, the mountains, and other things that you find in that green space. So let me just say here that there are some important ideas to go with qualitative research, and one I'll talk about repeatedly is that you gain information through interviews, observations, and collection of artifacts. Those are three important things that typify the kind of things that you associate with qualitative research. The other thing is this word phenomenology, which suggests that there are always multiple perspectives to any question, and that we ought to entertain at least the openness to multiple perspectives. It may be cultural openness, but it could be openness just for the sake of the human dimension that we find in the experiences that we have and in the things we like to do. So here's the next image associated with the word quantitative. I'd like you to take a moment, stop the video, and reflect on what you see here in this image. So the word quantitative has suggested a number of meanings. First of all, that it's math-driven. And a lot of that derives from the Greek letter, which means the sum of. It's the letter sigma. And it's used as a way to help define the idea of the summation of numbers. And when we sum all the numbers in a set and we divide by the number in that set, we get the average. So sigma is a very powerful part of all of our quantitative reasoning in research methods. It also associates with science, and down here you see the scientific method, which suggests that there is an orderly procedure of how we go through the process of doing quantitative research, and in fact that's true, that we generally try to start with background knowledge, we try to derive research questions and hypotheses, we establish a sample, that is a number who will be of people or things that will be in our research, we do some measurements, we apply some statistical analysis, and we display the results, and then we make our inferences. It's very black and white, it's distinct, it has high validity, high reliability, and it seems serious. There's no room for extras. There are very sharp angles to this, and you can see these other more subjective ideas. It's very unforgiving. And if you've ever done quantitative research and invested yourself in a project, it's always there are emotions associated with whether or not, in fact, you are successful and whether you can repeat the kinds of things that you found. So there is a great deal of emotion associated with this. The word positivism is one that I put there because it suggests that there is an objective way to do things and that we live by objective means. That is, these are very important to the way we progress as a society and as a profession and as individuals, that there is a way we can define our world which is objective and removed from our very subjective individual experience. So here you see the qualitative side of the types of research, and I've expanded the idea so that you can see the categories that we're going to be using throughout this course to identify the different characteristics of these types of research. So starting with the theory or framework, that is the information that you bring to a study. We always have a research review of some kind that suggests what others have thought and how we pull the ideas together. So that's important in qualitative research as much as in quantitative. However, in qualitative research, we can really see the idea of theory or theorizing in a very different way. That is, we derive ideas and we talk about them throughout the research process. They are not merely mentioned at the beginning as a way to guide our research, but rather we can reflect on them and interact with theory throughout our research process, should we choose. There's a design for research in qualitative studies, just as in any, and they go from the simplest use of interviews only in a study, which is very effective, to the use of multiple data collection methods, multiple partners, or immersion in a culture. So we could be using our observations and our artifact collection, in fact, to describe a culture in all of its complexities, or we could say we're going to do something which is more focused and is more based on a single approach. Sampling in qualitative research is primarily concerned with making sure that your sample matches the purpose. Sample size is not a determining factor of quality, and this is something that is a major misconception on the part of most people. More does not mean better necessarily in qualitative research. So you have to build an argument around the inclusion of actors or participants in a study. You do not have to make the argument around sample size as you do in quantitative. Data collection, as I mentioned, is interviews, artifacts, and observations. Data analysis goes through a careful process which can begin as soon as you start collecting the data. That's why I have the theory also at the bottom interacting with the ideas as you analyze data. Oftentimes, as soon as you collect data, you begin to analyze data, and there's an interesting interaction that you have there to inform the qualitative research study. And again, the results are going to be in terms of the themes or overall findings of a study. But again, interact with the overall theory or that framework. I don't want people to get too concerned with the word theory. I use it because it's a great word, but I use it as a way to suggest that there is prior knowledge and important literature that predates your study and to which you should address your study. So in this part of the picture of quantitative research, it's important to note that there are two separate categories that we address in this course. One of them is the descriptive quantitative, which simply collects data and displays the frequencies and percentages and averages, and has limited ability to make what we call generalizations or inferences. The inferences that we draw are important, but they are difficult to generalize. They may be used for specific decision making or to suggest ideas, but do not have the power nor the weight that we would give a study which has more advanced statistics, which is over here on the inferential side. So let's amplify and expand this diagram and look at the different categories that support each. Quantitative research, as I said, is more complicated than the qualitative in that there's this stepping stone of descriptive research that quite often is the first in a phase of steps which leads from descriptive to inferential. You can see how sometimes you collect survey data or you collect census data and display it descriptively, and then you may go on to do more advanced work in the inferential statistical designs. But in both cases, you begin with a framework and you operate from that either measurement framework or some kind of concept. And I suggest that there's a role of theory that's even more important in quantitative research because everything can be measured and quantified and therefore is tied back to a specific language definitional framework. That's where the essence of this idea of primary research and research review is so much a part of this and so important. In the same way, theory then suggests what the design will be. So descriptive research really is survey research, as I said, or census. Over here on the inferential side, we have what I consider to be the most important design, and that is experimental design, in which we take an experimental group, we impose a treatment or some kind of intervention, and a control group which is static or has a neutral or a placebo, that is some kind of substitute, and then we measure the differences. So there are a number of different designs that we apply there. Sampling, in this case, takes into account not only that there's an important group that we are sampling from or a population, but that there are sufficient numbers in that population to support the inferences that we would like to make, or generalizations. Data collection is very important. Measurement is another term used, but it means that we're taking these ideas, as complex as they are, like motivation or achievement or competence, and we're translating them into measurable outcomes. And we need to have either a test, a survey, or some other type of measurable instrumentation to accomplish that. Data analysis is done through, is based on the design really. So if you have an experimental design, you have some choices to make. Either you're going to have two groups and you might do a t-test. You may have more than two groups in which you're doing some variation of the analysis of variance. Or in the case of studies which are done on, say, secondary data or data which you would like to explore the results, you might be using correlations or other statistical analysis. The field of statistics is not static, that it is growing. The ability that we have to analyze data has become much more powerful. So our statistical programs are accessible, but nonetheless, there are still rules that apply to how we use those statistical analyses to come to our next step, the results or the conclusions, and they help govern the level of inferences or the power of our inferences and the power of our argument that we derive from our studies. So overall, you can see the importance of theory in determining what happens in a quantitative study. We don't have that same kind of reciprocal arrangement that we do, where there's a give and a take on our theoretical thinking, as we did in our qualitative studies. We use theory as a very strict guide for quantitative research. So again, we return to this big picture of the types of research, and I want to suggest that there are a very important advantage to gain when we distinguish between qualitative and quantitative research, and think in those terms. I do not want to leave you with the idea that the world is divided into these. Rather, the world does, and researchers do, integrate qualitative and quantitative, and there is a middle ground. In the past, I'd say 15 or 20 years, we have found mixed methods research to be that middle ground. And I will talk about that in future presentations. But for now, I'd like to leave you with this idea that it's important to delve deeply into these two and then come up with the synthesis or the integration between qualitative and quantitative as a way of representing all of the options that we have available for the types of research.